to our third night of the warrant review. This evening, before we begin, I have a message from our Sergeant-at-Arms, Bill Bradstreet, who's running late tonight. He would like to remind everyone to please silence your mobile devices at the beginning of the meeting. And he looks forward to joining us in a short while. We have
wants to take his allotted 3 questions, feel free.
We have some unfinished business from last night. So, Steve, I'll turn things over to you so we can continue last night's hearing before we move on to the agenda for this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We pivot from last night's heady topics to mundane items like unpaid bills from the prior fiscal year. If you turn to page 1 in your warrant booklet, there is a short list of unpaid bills. For those who are new, there is we live in a statutory environment that requires that by a date certain after the close of the fiscal year, all bills from the prior fiscal year be received and paid. When those invoices come in after the date that the DOR has identified as being too late, they go on the warrant for approval next year, and they require 9/10 vote at town meeting to approve. These unpaid bills range from $17 worth of auto supplies to $10,800 worth of fuel. If there are any questions about those, we'd be happy to take those. But this is we'll see a short list like this every year as part of the warrant.
Any questions from the committee?
Nope.
Mr. Zubrick.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I don't know, I'm maybe going deaf or something, but I don't think the mics are turned on.
Is it better when I'm closer?
Yeah.
Does that make any difference?
Thank you, Mr. Zubrick. You're doing a wonderful job.
Is irreplaceable.
No questions from the committee. Are there any questions from the audience? Is there
Move the article.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Article 2 is budget transfers, so those are transfers across line items within the current year budget, transfers that need to be made prior to the end of the year so that we can close our books in a balanced fashion. There are 5 items listed here. There are 2 more that we identified after the Select Board voted this warrant forward, so I will I'll briefly describe the 5 you see, and then I'll describe the 2 that you don't. We have $35,000 from police personnel to police capital outlay. Given the hiring cycle and nature of hiring in police, we often have vacancies from time to time during the year, and consistent with past practice, when the fiscal year is coming to a close, we work with the chief to identify small capital items that he would otherwise be requesting in the 24 budget, and we often try to buy those if we have a surplus in the current year budget. So the $35,000 will cover body armor replacement, tasers, breaching tools that need to be replaced within the department. The second item, $13,750 from DPW personnel to DPW capital outlay. This item, along with the $75,000 and $75,000, those are for chemical. I'm sorry, we have 2 that are the same. I'm making this more confusing than it needs to be. The $13,750 is related to one of the vehicles that was slated to be replaced. After the budget was set, the costs are higher than they were, so we're making this transfer so that we can purchase one of the vehicles that was approved last year. The next 2, $75,000 from water personnel and retained earnings to water operating, is for chemical costs at the plant that have gone up considerably during the fiscal year. $55,000 from water retained earnings to water capital outlay is also related to vehicle replacement. These are again, the bids came in. When we went out to bid after the budget was set, we needed more money to replace these vehicles. The 2 that you don't see, there's another $25,000 item from sewer retained earnings to sewer capital for the same reason. And then lastly, there's a $12,000 transfer from debt interest to accounting personnel, and that's to cover a personnel transfer that was made during the year that we need to have done in the budget to close the books. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions from the board?
Steve, real quick, can you frame the the percentage of the chemical? Do you know, was that a 10% override, overrun, or
Yeah, it was well more than 10.
So it was off of much lower, a
And I
lower
think
estimate.
we'll have David Lane here shortly, but I believe it's a combination of both price and quantity. So it was, the prices are up considerably more than they were a year ago, and we needed more quantity than we had budgeted.
And then on the vehicles, was that for, again, I guess, was that as like 10% over on a $500,000 estimate, or?
Probably higher percent, lower dollar figure would be my guess.
Okay. That's it.
Questions from the audience? Is there a motion?
Move the article.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Article 6 in the special town meeting warrant. This is an unusual article. This is related to the Folly Hill subdivision, which goes back, I think, 2 decades. When I started in 2014, Joe Collins and I worked to recapture around $750,000 in unpaid taxes on that subdivision. That subdivision, I think to put it mildly, moved forward in fits and starts over several decades. The contract, normally the town will hold a bond when work is being done for the improvements that need to be made as part of the project. In 99.9% of projects in Danvers and everywhere else, the work eventually gets done and the bond is released. In this case, the contractor walked away from $266,000. We've been working with the bank that financed the project. They have turned the check over to the town. We need town meeting to accept those funds so that the engineering department can oversee the work to complete a 20-year-old subdivision project and make sure that the equipment and maintenance related to I believe one of the pumping stations is in good repair, and that the streetscapes are completed as required in the planning board approval.
Thank you. Questions from the board?
Just, obviously, this amount is adequate enough to be able to deal with the problems that are up there in regards to the finishing this. So,
Engineering department will be providing some in-kind staff time to oversee the work, but we do believe it will be.
This is going to be done in-house.
The work will be contracted, but our engineering department, Stephen King, will be overseeing the work.
Questions from the audience? Is there a motion?
move the article.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
We don't have the names tonight, which is consistent with past practice. This is an article that, by the time we get to town meeting, we will have a slate. The motion, the action tonight is to recommend approval, even though we don't have the names.
I don't think we ever have.
Then maybe it's no action
Yeah,
tonight.
we don't vote on it at all. It's that is a selectman action.
Thank you. Moving right along.
But if anyone would like to be a field driver, reach out to the chairman of the Board of Selectmen.
There's only one.
Looking for a field driver, yes.
Yeah.
Article 5 is one that has appeared in the warrant every year, and as of today, we are questioning why it appears in the warrant, so you may never see it again. But we will vote on it this year because it is here. But for at least 30 or 40 years, we have been voting to give the town treasurer permission to collect the taxes using the tools that are laid out in Mass General Law. By next year's budget process, we'll have some guidance from DOR whether this is something that should have been dropped off several decades ago. But in the meantime, we would be looking for a motion to approve.
Any questions from the board? From the audience? Is there a motion?
Move the article.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Article 6 is formal acceptance of the annual reports that were mailed out to town meeting members earlier this year.
Any questions? Another wonderful job by the town staff compiling the reports. Certainly appreciate getting those, and I know many town meeting members appreciate getting them in a timely fashion. Thank you.
And I would pause and say kudos to Ann Freitas and Sharon Clement in DPW who really work to coordinate. All departments pitch in, but they really take the lead on that.
Great, thank you. Questions from the audience? Is there a motion?
Accept the reports of the town boards, commissions, officers, committees.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Jumping ahead, Article 32, on page 32, I believe, in the warrant booklets. Several years ago, the state started collecting a fee on ride hails, Ubers and Lyfts, and et cetera, and a small portion of that is remitted back to towns and cities. Since we started receiving those funds, the town meeting has been appropriating the proceeds into the revolving account for the senior budget, so that in support of the transportation services that we provide.
Paul, anything?
Nothing.
Ted?
No questions.
Aaron?
Just a question, are the ride shares responsible to contribute the same percentage to every town? Yeah, okay.
It's a
thank
per
you.
ride fee, yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Wally? Eric?
Nothing.
Arthur?
All set.
Mike?
Nope.
Questions from the audience? Is there a motion?
Move Article 32.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Article 30, page 30 in your, very confusing when the article and the page number are the same, but Article 30, page 30. We have 7 revolving funds that are, I'm not going to say appropriated, they're approved each year, because essentially this vote gives the departments that oversee these revolving funds permission to expend up to the amount that you see on the screen, should revenues be generated in that amount. So the largest one, the child care program, that's predominantly the Fun Club, which is offered at all 5 of our elementary schools. These are the projections from Dave Mountain, Kathy Bowden, and their staff in terms of how many students they anticipate next year. If half the number of kids signed up next year and they only collected $460,000, they would only be allowed to spend the $460,000. What this says is if they collect $2 million, they would have to come back for permission to spend more than the $940,000. Happy to take any questions.
Mike?
No, I'm good, thank you.
Arthur?
All set.
Eric?
Nothing.
Is that, the child care program, is that their max capacity, or can they actually take on more?
I believe that's close to max. They
Okay.
expanded into the 5th school a couple of years ago.
Yep.
So
Okay.
they could
That's it.
probably squeeze a few more in, but not much.
Thanks.
Ted?
Is that water use mitigation, that's roughly in line with the rebates that we send out, or?
That would be, I think that number is well north of the total value of the rebates that we send out.
Okay.
We also use that program to offset some of the grounds and buildings improvements. and the like.
Paul?
All set.
Questions from the audience? Is there a motion?
I move the article.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
I think we'll jump over 36 for now and tackle 37 through 39. Each year, as we're working, we receive our free cash certification in between December and January each year. The town's established policy for free cash is that at the conclusion of town meeting, we will leave behind no less than 1% of our net operating revenue as a carry forward in free cash. So once we've identified and worked with the departments to see which capital plan projects we're going to move forward, we try to reserve and designate some of those funds to keep our stabilization accounts, our savings accounts in a healthy position. The general stabilization, I believe, as noted in here, is it's approaching $5 million. With the strategic goal of the last half decade has been to try to build that as the primary savings account for the town, rather than having it sitting in free cash. It's parked in the general stabilization. So we're recommending, based on the free cash cert, that a modest amount be transferred over. The goal from, again, half a decade ago was to build this account to a point where each year somehow in the tax levy a small amount would be transferred to maintain a certain percentage of our net operating. We haven't gotten there yet, but when we can, we try to recommend free cash be transferred. The debt stabilization, which is the fund we draw from to offset debt service in the operating budget. We draw down that amount each year. This is where we replenish that account each year. So we're recommending $500,000 in free cash be put into the debt stabilization. OPEB trust fund, we were successful a couple of years ago in moving, I believe it's $350,000 now, or is it $300,000 into the benefits?
It started in 250 last year, it's 300 this year.
So with the total contribution is split between the tax levy and the free cash. The goal eventually is for all of the OPEB contribution to exist within the tax levy. Again, the theory is if it's a free cash appropriation, it should be something you can walk away from. These should be one time. So we're halfway to our goal in moving the OPEB over, but for the time being, it's split between the tax levy and free cash. So happy to take questions on any of those three stabilization funds, or the two stabilization funds in the trust fund.
Paul?
Yeah, what type of interest are we gaining on these three funds per se?
Through you, Mr. Chairman. So the general and debt stabilization are in an MMDT account. They're earning interest. I think it's significant now. It's up to close to 5%. The OPEB trust, that's invested in the market through Bartholomew, our trust fund manager. That one did not do well last year.
I think, I don't have it right in front of me, but we expect to be, with the OPED, meet the goals of fully funding that, did you say by 2035, or?
So that would be the pension. The goal is to fully fund the pension by 2035.
Yeah.
Keep making, as many contributions as we can to OPEB now, and then in 2035 redirect some of those appropriations that we were using to fully fund pension into our OPEB trust fund.
Okay, that's it, Mr. Chairman. Thank
Good.
you.
Rodney, is OPEB managed by the same folks that manage the employee pension fund, or is it a different asset manager?
No. So yeah, we have our Siegel Marco is our new investment consultant on the pension side. We use Bartholomew Trust for both the OPEB as well as our scholarship funds.
Okay. That's it for me.
No questions.
Quick question on the General Stabilization Fund. So, established in 1982, if I heard you right, we've been making deposits, but we haven't yet withdrawn from it, or?
Yeah, when I started in 2014, the money contributions would be made into the general stabilization fund, and then capital expenditures would be made out of the general stabilization fund.
Okay.
And really just kind of an accounting change that we stopped putting it in just to take it out. We make contributions in when we can, but we fund the capital through the free cash. And again, one of the
The goal
goals
is to just grow this.
we want to grow this and then get it to a point where it's just there. And we would, one policy that would make a lot of sense is if, and I'm making these numbers up, if getting it to 5% of the net operating was the goal, then you would, in the budget went up 3.2%, you would try to add 3.2% to the fund so that it would kind of stay consistent with your overall budget. But we're probably a couple years away from that conversation. And I lost my other thought because we were here till midnight last night.
11:35.
Thank you, sir.
I'm all set.
Mike,
Nope, good, thank you.
questions from the audience? Mr. Zubrick?
Thank you very much. Mark Zubrick, resident. I have one question, and forgive me if I'm off a little bit. The debt stabilization fund, wasn't that the original high school funding mechanism that we originally had? Isn't that correct?
Yeah, I couldn't tell you what year it was established, but it was called the School Stabilization Fund for a period of
Correct.
time.
And at one of the town meetings, I even asked the question, why has it been changed? Now it seems to be able to be used on anything, not just the high school or the school system. Correct?
Sure. The debt, yes, the debt that we have, the way that our debt's been structured, without this, we would be either defaulting on debt payments or having to do a budget override.
Correct.
So it offsets debt that the town has
So
bonded and borrowed for.
the original purpose was for the high school, fund at that time.
And I would say that makes a lot of sense because they are by far and away the largest
Correct.
debt issuances that towns and cities make.
That's why there were withdrawals and deposits on a regular basis to compensate for the interest and debt service. So so that right now, this fund can be used for anything that's on debt, right?
If I could, Mr. Chair, I think the reality is that although we have line items that identify the percentage of our total debt payment, but we make a total debt, everything gets mixed into the same
That's right.
pool, and so it would be somewhat foolish to say that this is only going towards the high school or to some other point of debt, since all our debt is put together and we pay it off with a singular fund, and this stabilization fund is intended to be able to alleviate problems in that area.
I'm just leading back to the original purpose of this fund. This fund was for the high school and the education. One of the things that I've noticed, and forgive me if I'm off here, but there's an awful lot of free cash. We had, what, $8.7 million this year in free cash that was left over from last year's budget?
We did provide a breakdown of the free cash at the budget hearing with the Select Board and the FinCom. That number's accurate. It was, came in at 14%, which was just above the town's target policy, as was mentioned with the Select Board. That number is actually low. I don't have, as we said with Select Board, we're probably a year away from revisiting that policy. But just for the benefit of those listening, the driver of the free cash number this year was that Maya, the town's insurer, gave all member communities a 1-month premium holiday, and we learned that at the tail end of the budget process. So we had budgeted for that was about $1 million spike caused by that.
That's one of the components.
Correct. And the budget that we approved for '24 has about $1.25 million in increased local receipt projections.
Right.
So there's $2 million off the top that won't be in next year's free cash certification. It was an unusually high free cash year, I guess,
Well,
is a long way of saying that.
it's a combination of free cash and the COVID funds that were deposited earlier in the year. And basically, what we're doing is, are we spending every single penny of this free cash right now? I didn't see the allocation of where the free cash was going to.
No, I think right now we're just north of the 1%. So again, the 1% net is around $1.2, $1.3 million.
That's a holdback.
That's what should be held back. So we're north of that right now, but by a small, I'd say by about $250,000.
Which again, just to clarify, that also becomes part of free cash. So just to clarify, free cash in '24 was $8.3 million. Of that, 1.2 of it was the money from last year that we didn't take out of free cash. So
Okay, so it was even higher than the 8.7?
no, that would be the opposite. It'd be 1.2 less.
1.2
So of your
less.
8.3, 1.2 was that you carried over from the year before.
And when you combine them both, it's 8.7.
No, it's still 8.3.
It is?
Yeah.
Okay, because I've been quoted that number, 8.7, all the time. So that was my purpose of the question, is that this stabilization fund is the original high school education or high school building fund at that time, because I know that I was involved in that. And that's changed its name about 3 years ago, I think.
Maybe more than that.
Yeah.
And I think that the fund has been used by the town every year since the high school was built.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's our savings account for capital equipment.
It offsets a small portion of the debt.
That's right. All right, thank you very much, so good luck with it.
Anything else from the audience? Is there a motion on Article 37?
Motion to move the article.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Article 38.
Move Article 38.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. And Article 39.
Move Article 39.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
We're going back to number 4 now. So that, I think the question we had,
That's everything from last night.
that's everything from
catches us
last
up.
night. Yep, so now,
All right. Before we move on to conversations that we had scheduled for tonight, Eric, especially since we do have the chairman of the select board here, could you just give us a recap? I know Ted and I weren't able to attend last week's select board meeting. Could you just give us just a brief recap, high level of the discussion at the select board meeting last night with the finance, last week with the finance committee?
Sure, I'll say the presentation.
Yes. Thank you.
So, as you alluded to, on behalf of the committee and with 5 of my colleagues, I did present to the Select Board some of the recommendations from the committee, and which I will summarize. 2 distinct ones. First, we brought to the board's attention that we thought the trash and recycling bins associated with automatic collection should be a cost borne by residents. And secondly, we absolutely thought that it's a great opportunity or a great time to invest or increase the budget for our schools. I mean, that's just really the high-level summary of it, and asking the board to really consider how that might be done. And so we had a little bit of conversation about that, and I know the select board was certainly receptive to figuring out ways to be supportive of our school system, and that's how I would characterize that.
Thank you. And Mr. Chairman, thank you for the opportunity to, for the Finance Committee to share your thoughts. We appreciate the welcome of the Select Board.
Anytime you want to come and make a recommendation, we're open arms.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I think I was able to watch a little bit of the meeting from my lousy Wi-Fi hotel room connection, and but I do remember you saying something along the lines of, how do we get there? And so I think we have some great opportunities in the coming year for a path forward where we can hopefully improve the way we fund our schools and do it in a more thoughtful, not that we're not already doing it in a thoughtful way, but do it in a more thoughtful way that makes the most sense for the success of the future of our school system. I don't know if anyone else has some comments before we move into the specific warrant articles that we're moving forward on tonight. But that's all I've got to say.
See, I may just offer a comment.
Yeah.
While we embrace funding the school budget with the funds they need, I would like to know what the goals are and that they're measurable. And in 3 years' time, we see what the outcomes are. You know, if we give it, we have the right to take it.
Absolutely.
So they want some kind of metrics.
Yeah. Although I'm not sure that 3 years is enough to, you know, as long as we're moving in the right direction.
Well,
I don't- yeah.
right, what
Yeah.
the outcomes are. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't discourage smaller classroom size in elementary schools.
Yeah.
But a lot of that is the quality of the teacher and the behavioral patterns of the children, as well as smaller classes. And it's more programs in the high school, we hope will draw in more kids and take care of the kids. We want to keep them here,
Yeah.
without a doubt. And appropriate programs would be appropriate. And I'm not going to suggest to the school committee what those programs would be. But again, I'd like to know the goals so we can measure them.
I would just say that we have, I'm glad you're open to looking at the classroom size in elementary school. With 5 kids, I have a lot of data points on interacting with the teachers, and we haven't had a single one that I would consider ineffective. They've all been terrific, so I don't doubt the ability of the superintendent and her staff to pick good teachers for our kids.
Okay?
All right.
Thanks, Ted. All right, are we going to take 36 next? Okay. Article 36, the Special Ed Stabilization Fund.
So just a brief background is noted in the warrant book. This was set up last year. We had started to experience this spike in special ed 2 years ago. We've talked at length this budget cycle about the way that the circuit breaker program works and the delay in reimbursement, and that as costs are climbing, the reimbursements lag, and it creates a crisis like the one that we're going to be dealing with in the special town meeting article. So there is enabling statute that allows for the creation of these stabilization funds. These are designed to supplement circuit breaker, and we set it up last year with a $150,000 contribution. We're recommending an additional $600,000 this year. This fund is appropriated into by town meeting, and during the course of the fiscal year, it can be accessed by votes of the school committee and the select board. So the recommendation is to continue to grow that. This is a year we have the free cash to do that, and then it would be accessible to the committee and the school select board during the budget year, similar to the way the FinCom reserve is accessible to the finance committee.
Sure. So it would take a vote of both committees to take it out.
Correct.
Okay. Paul?
Would we be consulted at all, or is that just between the select board and the school committee?
Select board and school committee.
Okay.
And the order would be school committee, then select board.
Yes.
Yeah.
So right now, if this goes through, we're gonna have $750,000 in that fund.
Correct.
Is there an idea, or is there a thought process as to where you want that sum to be for the flexibility, unfortunately, that we see on a yearly basis?
I think over time, the goal would be, you build it and you leave it.
Say that again?
The goal wouldn't be to grow it indefinitely. The goal
Yeah.
would be to fund it. I think that, in part, the answer to that question really depends on where we are a year from now. We've also talked at length, if these special ed numbers aren't reined in through a combination of local programming and state intervention, Danvers won't be the only community that is in a lot of trouble next year trying to figure out how to fund this. So the goal now is to grow it by an amount that we can based on the free cash certification. If it needs to be accessed, we would be talking about potentially replenishing it next year, but there is no plan to grow it and grow it and grow it. Rodney's reminding, there is a cap in statute. I think it probably would be considerably higher than where we are, but.
It cannot exceed 2% of annual net school spending.
Well, I fully support it, but, so thank you. That's it for me.
Ted?
I don't think I have any question on this one.
No questions.
Don't have any questions?
Nothing.
Arthur?
I'm all set.
Mike?
No, good.
Questions from the audience? Mark?
If I may, the fund that this establishes is basically a projection of what we can return back from the special education fund. I guess we get, what, 40% or 50% of the...
This would be separate from the circuit breaker. The circuit breaker reimburses 75% of qualifying expenses above $45,000 per student. That money comes directly from the state to the schools. They have a circuit breaker account. This would be a separate account that would be under the control of the school committee and the select board. So not segregated. They are segregated funds.
So it does not have anything to do with that? Because there's a revolving account that's coming from the state to reimburse us
That's
for
the
some
circuit
of the
breaker.
special education costs.
Right. Separate.
And that goes right into the treasurer's office directly.
I think this question for Brian. Does Jill receive those funds? Do they-
Like any state aid payment, Chapter 70 unrestricted aid, it comes in through the state.
So
It's
that'll
wired
be
in.
right into the town's coffers.
Correct.
Okay, the one thing that I don't understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this special education fund is a savings account basically for unexpected costs in the future. Correct?
I would say, I'm not sure savings account, I'd probably describe it as a safety net. So we'll be using close to twice the amount of circuit breaker that we typically do to balance the 23 budget and brace for the 24 budget. Much like the town has policies with free cash and other things, the schools typically hold in reserve the most recent year's worth of circuit breaker, but we're going to be considerably lower than that going into next year because of the growth that we've seen. So really, if the costs continue to increase, this is one other way that we can offset some of those costs without having to come back to town meeting and look at any other number of options to cover those state required costs.
Okay, because what it looks like to me, and it's, we've experienced special education increases in the past. How much was returned last year from the state and the year before? I don't, those numbers don't ever show up.
They are reviewed as part of the school department budget, and certainly we have school staff here. If you have a specific question, I'm sure that somebody has an answer.
Okay, does anybody know?
What I would,
Through you,
before that,
Mr.
what I would
Chairman.
say generally about this account is that, if the special education costs plateau or decline again as they have cyclically, funds could be drawn out of this to offset some of those costs, so that this isn't a fixed account. This can be utilized as part of any budget process as well. This isn't just available for mid-year transfers.
Well, my major concern is that we're getting money back from the previous investments that we've made in special education. And now what we're doing is we're setting up a separate and independent account that can be dispersed by the vote of the school committee and selectmen. Where does the town meeting play in this?
Town meeting decides whether it wants to appropriate these funds based on exactly what you just said. And if they don't, then it doesn't become available to the school committee and the select board.
Okay, so this is the town meeting's authorization to put these funds into this account.
Correct.
Yep.
Thank you.
Anything else from the audience? Is there a motion?
Move the article.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Article 4 of the special town meeting.
I will do a great disservice trying to explain this in thorough detail, but I will start by acknowledging Pam Crum and Mary Wormers, who are in the room. We've been working very closely with both of them since last fall to get our arms wrapped around the scale and scope of the problem that we're dealing with. We've collaborated with them, looking at their FY23 costs, as well as the projected 24 numbers. And, well, go ahead.
Sorry.
And so based on our circuit breaker account currently, what we're projecting for next year, we are recommending $1.5 million from free cash be transferred as part of the special town meeting into the FY23 school budget, which will help them to close their books and essentially preserve $1.5 million in circuit breaker that they can use to cover the costs that they know they're going to be facing in the FY24 budget related to the out-of-district student costs that we have. And I think we would be happy to take detailed questions. That's kind of the general overview. But again, we have the content area experts in the room with us tonight.
Mary, do you have anything before we start? Or, Mr. Chairman, you're here as well, if you want to share anything? No? Not yet?
Unless you need us to.
Well, we'll start asking questions. How about that? Mike?
So let me I try to wrap my hands around this. So basically, in the last fiscal year, we had about $1.5 million worth of unexpected special ed costs. Those costs will, throughout the next fiscal year, be reimbursed in large part through our circuit breaker. We need to make, obviously, the $1.5 million worth of payments today because they were accrued during the prior fiscal year. And in essence, we would then expect that the additional circuit breaker money that would come in for fiscal year '24 is going to unfortunately be necessary in order to meet a similar level of higher special ed costs.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, that's pretty much correct. Just the 1.5 is for the FY23 cost over the current year.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think that it would be certainly a wonderful thing if there was a different mechanism through the state that allowed us, and not just us, but all communities, to be able to have a much more secure and anticipated special ed budget. And it's always been difficult to understand that you spend months putting together a budget and literally just 3 students can move in from out of the district and can really throw that substantially out of whack. And I think everybody appreciates the effort that's been made through the circuit breaker, but obviously it would be easier if the state assumed a larger direct portion of out-of-district school costs. And it would also, quite frankly, be much fairer to those students who need that service.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The one thing I wanted to emphasize from what Mike is saying when we talk about the circuit breaker is that the circuit breaker essentially returns 75% of the amount of an outplacement over approximately $49,000. So if you send a student out, we basically own the first $49,000. Circuit breaker kicks back, as I say, about 75% of that. But the major, it's not returned in large part. The major expense is still ours. And so imagine, again, as you pointed out, 4 outplacements, and this is what happened in the last fiscal year. Actually, fiscal year 22, I think, is when it hit. And in budgeting for fiscal year 23, we had already prepared the budget when it hit. So it was really 2 budget cycles that those students who moved in impacted the budget and left us with an unexpected shortfall for the special education. So this money, and that's going to carry over this, and that's not including the possibility of additional students moving in, which, as you point out, there is simply no control over that.
Yeah. And I, of course, I think it's always difficult when we deal with this particular issue, because I don't believe that there is anybody in this room who does not want every student to thrive, regardless of whether they have to go to a place that is going to, frankly, cost the town a phenomenal amount of money. The reality is, though, is that as much as we may want that, the financial reality of it is can be very, very difficult for us as a community and the school system. So, I certainly in this particular situation, I am 1,000% supportive of doing it this way, and I think that there is a commitment, from what I can make of it, from the school department to try to do everything they can do to keep kids in our system. I think that we can do more, I'm sure, as a community to fund those efforts, and that those are really good investments, because my guess is that every $5 that we spend to try to keep a kid in our system and help them thrive in our system is probably saves us $20 on the back end, which is a great thing. But at this point right now, this is something that we have to do. It's just what has to happen. So.
When we use circuit breaker, we use the previous year's circuit breaker account to pay off this year's bills. So what happened, though, when we were short in FY22, we had to use the money that we got that year to pay off. So we were behind coming into the school year. So then we have this year's circuit breaker, and what would happen without this money is we would have to drain down all of the circuit breaker money we got for this year that we would really need to use for next year. So that's why this kind of influx of free cash has been extremely helpful for us in the budget process.
And I would say you play that forward another year, and if you've used last year's circuit breaker, this year's circuit breaker, and you're banking on next year's circuit breaker, those costs have to get covered. We are statutorily required to pay those costs. So the 4.79% budget increase that we were able to negotiate and sort of navigate this year, absent those circuit breaker costs, would have been considerably higher. And I think that's the fear that Danvers, Newton, and a lot of communities are looking at a year and a half out. And that's why the governor's supplemental budget included money. We, the MMA and the MASs have a lot of concerns about the formulas that were written into those funds, as is always the case. The legislature sometimes gets too cute for itself, and so we've given them some very clear input on how they could make that money work immediately for the communities that are struggling. That process continues, so we're not out of the woods yet, but yeah.
The only thing that I would add, you did a good job. It's like you've been on school committee for a long time. The only thing I would add is I'm not going to reiterate it, but it's not predictable. It's never predictable. You never know what's going to happen. And although it would be nice to do, and we will, I'm sure the school department will do everything they can to build programs, but it's still not easy, and it's hard to build programs, especially a lot of the outplacements are one-offs. They're one person going to a place, and you can't build a program for that. Really, you can't do it. So the bottom line is it's not predictable. It's probably going to continue for a little while, and we don't really have any other choice but to do what we're doing here. So that's all I'll add to what Mike said.
Eric?
My question was actually answered very well. What happens if we don't appropriate it? And so between both of you all, so thank you.
Well,
No questions.
No questions.
I have a quick question for you. On the 9 students that were also placed from within the district, and maybe this might, I guess what I'll say is anecdotally, I know we lost a key staff member at Smith that was teaching the reading program at Smith.
Yes.
And again, anecdotally or speculation from parents that I know, that might cause a few kids to need out-of-district placement. I know you may not. Has the departure of key staff members and basically like our relatively thin staffing in that area contributed to some of the need for outplacement services?
Yes, we actually, when the teacher left, we did have one student go out of district from there because we didn't have the staff in.
Like right away?
for that. So, right away. So then, because that was already, we were
Yep.
in negotiating with that and kind of working with through the process with that family so that they went out. But we've hired a capable person, staff member
Right.
to do that. So she's been doing very well with the 3 students that are remaining. We do have new students to populate in that program for next year and continue to get that staff person lots of training, and she's very committed to it. So we're looking forward to
Okay.
that. We also work with an outside consultant
Yep.
that has been helping us build that program to make sure we are able to keep, that we are meeting what the private school programs are like.
Right.
Because she's one that works on the other side of the table and
Yep.
helps families get to these out-of-district placements. So we are really working with her to make sure we have all the right pieces in place. We also are building a middle school program, so the students that are there now are moving up into the 6th
Yep.
grade program, and we have trained our current reading special ed reading teacher with giving her more training, specialized training, and we have a solid program for that
Okay.
grade 6 cohort.
So the point I'm driving at for the millions of people watching at home is that a little extra investment in special education can reap immediate potential savings for the town by having extra staff to mitigate some of the needs that we need for kids that are currently ending up out of district. I think that's the only question I have right now.
Aaron, do you wanted to follow up?
Yeah, just one question. For the student that was outplaced because that teacher departed, are we able to get that student back?
We would like to, again, we have to do that through the IEP process.
Okay.
But we would like that. And
How
that's
long is that process? Is it going to take like another school year or?
Yeah, I think on the next.
Okay, okay, thank you.
Paul?
Just to follow up a little bit on Ted's line of questioning, are we fully staffed now? Based on what you see as the needs today, which couldn't change tomorrow, are you basically fully staffed, hopefully?
I am, we need a kindergarten teacher. We've had a higher enrollment in kindergarten than expected, so that is one place where I do need that, and that's some of the special education funding is we kind of have to shift some of the funding around. So again, this 1.5 is key so that the circuit breaker stays high for the next coming school year, so that I have that money in the budget to provide that that extra kindergarten teacher at Thorpe. Thorpe had over 60 kids register for kindergarten. We've only been having 2 classes at Thorpe, and we needed to add a 3rd. So that is that.
Okay.
We still have a little bit of
Still
special
20
ed,
per class.
we still need some counselors, in some of our programs. We're getting by in our programs without those counselors, but having a counselor above a social worker would be very important for us to have. And again, depending on how some of the money plays out, we'll be looking to fund something like that.
It sounds to me like there's still some need.
Yeah, we do have some need, but we
Okay.
can't,
We don't want
the
people to
programs that we
think
have,
we're-
the special ed programs we have are good. It's just that extra,
Yes.
the therapeutic support that we would be looking for.
I understand. That's it. Thank you.
So the 1.5, Mary, isn't really enough, is what you're saying. It's okay.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yes,
Like,
yeah,
it-
I really, we could use some extra money to fund that kindergarten
Yeah.
position so that we can keep that circuit breaker funding
Yeah.
higher, so that we can cover our costs for the next school year.
Yeah, and I can't help but think about Mr. Zubrick's question a short while ago, when he was talking about free cash. Rodney, you had said that, it's the town's policy on free cash to maintain a balance of 1%, and we're above that right now. How much is available in free cash for us to maintain our free cash policy?
In terms of the excess above?
Yeah, what's the excess?
So if you,
Yeah.
hold on. Including the 1% and then other funds that are in free cash but are reserved, like, for example, funds we got for the 40R district, roughly $250,000 is above the 1% and not already sort of, even though you can't segregate free cash, segregated for certain uses.
Well, I don't know about anyone else, but I'd certainly be comfortable adding the 250,000 to that 1.5 million to alleviate some of those issues. I mean, I'm a, tax and spend liberal apparently, but thank you, Mr. Zubrick, for bringing that to our attention. I'm sure you do. But
Should we make motions
no,
now?
no,
after
let's
comment?
let's have some. But that would be my comment. But other questions from the audience? Mr. Zubrick.
You know what? I'm very concerned about the Finance Committee throwing budget money around, because you're in an advisory role, and I appreciate it. I sat there for 10 years, and it was long enough. But that's not a job for the Finance Committee. The school budget itself is fully funded as requested and has not been amended or reduced. And this year, we are very lucky in having $8.3 million of free cash, and we're throwing it around everywhere, and it's fine. That's what it's for. It's a savings that we've made. So what we're already talking about is $1.5 million. And the first discussion that I heard in regard to this article was, what are we getting for this money? What kind of steps did the school department take to refine their budget to the bare minimum? Because this is an injection of funds that are overdue, and we need to put those funds in place to pay the bills of the past. But I think, and I'm, forgive me if I'm going off dead center here, but I am very concerned that we had the school committee do the budget. It's fully funded, even with the 3.79 or 4% increase. That went up fine. But now what you're looking at is you're looking at another $250,000 that is hanging around in the free cash account. What about the taxpayers? What are you going to do for the taxpayers? We are taxed to the max. And that's been a model for years now. The problem is that we're overreaching our availability of funds that are available for our use. We have to start living within our budget. And this budget this is an emergency situation, I can understand it. And we are happy to do what the town manager is proposing with the free cash. What happens next year? What's going to happen next year? Whose pocket are we going to pick? The problem is that Yes, everybody wants to support the school department and all that, and we have in the past and in the future that we're doing right now. The problem is other people's money is running out, and the taxpayers are left behind. That's my whole comment here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Dan?
Thank you. Don't rise, if I may. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. While I admit we need to do the best we can for our students, I heard the need for a kindergarten teacher. I don't think that rises to the level of $250,000. And I don't think we should be doing the school department's job. I'd much rather they came back to us and said, we really need this position filled. It will cost us X. Can you help us out? Rather than just say, here's $250,000, go have a good time. I think we need to be a little more restrictive.
It's not what we're saying.
Well,
Dan, it's not what we're saying.
y-
If you watch the school committee, there was a bucket list of $840,000 that they could spend right away,
if I may,
okay?
I was on the school committee. Yes, we had bucket list. There's always bucket list.
There's always a bucket list.
They do the
You're
best
right.
they can, and I want to hear what they really need. And ask us, tell us what they need. We shouldn't be making up that number. That's their responsibility and their job. Tell us what you need. Tell us what the number is. If we've got $250,000 to play with, and I say play with because otherwise it sits there, let's use it judiciously and give them what they need specifically. But just don't give them $250, but just for the sake of giving it to them. That's my thought.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Go ahead. You know what, why don't we have Eric, if that's all right. Eric, go ahead.
So if you want to know what we really need, you look at what we presented to both the selectmen and the finance committee, in particular when it came to special education. And of that bucket list, quote unquote, there were $525,000 actually in costs that could have been used for special education. With the goal of not only meeting current student needs, but developing programs. The idea is to not have to have a fund that we have to go to consistently or for even several years of $1.5 million. The idea is to be able to develop programs in-house as well as deliver for our students right now. But develop programs in-house that will ultimately bring down the cost of outplacements. If we do that, $250,000 or $525,000 becomes an investment. And you can be penny wise and pound foolish in public life. You can have the ability to spend money now to save it later, but say, well, no, we're not going to do that. We're just going to, we have done that, frankly, in past years. I don't want to go into past history, but if you look at the school buildings, particularly high school, middle school, we could have saved millions of dollars in interest and building costs. But we decided it was more important not to have a short-term expense on people's tax bills. That's what we did. Okay. I would not like to see us go down that road again. We presented a responsible budget that we worked out with the town manager, but it left off some things that would have helped us save money later on because we recognize the town's fiscal condition and we appreciate what the town's doing for us with this fund and how the help that Steve and his team have given us with special education. But this issue is not going to go away until we get to build some programs to keep people in-house. So, thank you.
Thank you.
When we were working with the town and building this budget, we did have lots of different scenarios, and to some of the, what I put on that what's not in the budget slide, that ran us up to about a 9% increase. And looking back over the multi-years of increases that the school department has come in, there was no way that I was going to be able to come to you with a 9% increase. So we were trying to be fiscally responsible, get down to what we need, the bare bones of what we needed for a level service budget, and that's what we brought you. And then an extra kindergarten teacher is not a level service budget, it's an additional position. So that's what that's why it came in the way it did. So.
Mike?
I would even say that Mary was probably too kind in her bucket list. Like, if you look at other districts.
I'm sorry, could you just introduce
Oh, sorry, I'm
yourself?
Robin Doherty. I'm on the school committee. I'm
Okay.
sorry. Because she hasn't even proposed, like, we have no assistant full-time principals at the elementary school, which down the line, we really need to be looking at that. We have one curriculum director at each, one at the elementary, one at the middle school, one at the high school, who is responsible for every single content, which is absurd because we cannot expect that there's no way those curriculum directors can be specialists in everything. So yes, from like a special ed standpoint, like we did create our bucket list, but like I always say to Mary, like I don't even think we have enough staff as it is. So like if we can start with special ed, that's great. But I think down the road, we even need to look more at, as far as middle management in a district. I've worked for schools my whole life, so I have that background. But we are severely understaffed. Just to keep that in mind for future. I think we need to keep that in mind for future references. So, thank
Mike?
you.
So
Stay up or do you?
No, you can be seated.
Okay.
So I promised my wife that I would not become angry, because she said I was very much a get off my front lawn guy last night.
My wife doesn't even watch.
There's always sort of a similar issue in that world, but nonetheless, I am so tired of hearing people say to the Finance Committee, hey, you're an advisory board, stay in your lane. And I hate it the most from people who, like me, have been involved with this for 40 years and know full well what that lane is. This is the last stop before town meeting. It has always been the last stop before town meeting. This board has traditionally, at least in the time that I've been involved with it, made major decisions to change things before they go to town meeting. That has included, at times, the reduction of appropriations, and certainly, on many, many occasions, the increases of appropriation. To even imply that this group doesn't take that particular responsibility, a substantial responsibility, seriously, is an absolute affront to the people who have served here for varying amounts of time. To think that a decision, any decision that gets made up here is done lightly is ridiculous. In this particular situation, I agree 100% with the chairman. This amount at $1.5 million is an inferior amount. I don't care why it got here this way. I'm not here to polish over people's egos. I'm here to do what I believe, in my limited role as one member of this board, is in the best interest of the town of Danvers. Plain and simple. That includes the taxpayers. That includes the business owners who don't pay taxes directly. That includes, very, very importantly, the children of this community. Because the bottom line is that despite what we've heard over 2 weeks, I can assure you that the most important thing in this town are the children of this town who are its future. Nothing makes a town more desirable for good people to move into than great public schools. They don't move here because we're cheap. They don't move here because we've never had a tax override. they move here, especially young families, because they want to make sure their kids get the best education they possibly can. Bottom line. So in this instance, I'm going to do what I believe, based on my 37 years of experience in this town, in every capacity, based on the fact that for the last 4 generations of my family, we've gone to school in this community, and vote to increase this to $1.75 million.
Erin?
Thank you. I wholeheartedly support this as well. Being a parent in this town, I can see the deficit in the schools. I just want to ask, when the budget does come and then there is the wish list that's presented of what the true need actually is, can you put everything in? Absolutely everything you think you need, so that way it's apparent to everybody here that's questioning it, because it is missing everything. Elementary vice principals, they're actually working teachers. When they have to act as the vice principal, they get moved from the classroom. If there isn't an aide in that classroom, the kindergarten teacher gets pulled, and then the aide from the kindergarten is the teacher. So let's keep that all in mind when we're talking about this. There is an absolute deficit, and I agree, people move to towns for the school district. That not only helps your property value, it helps everything else. So I just want to make sure that that's clear. And yeah, it would be great if everything was presented. Thank you.
Arthur?
I just want to also add, I agree with Dan's point about tell us what you need, but I think that they did that when they were here. The slide that we kept talking about was what's not in the budget, and that was a very telling slide, and we all talked about it that night. And there were a lot of things that were really, that I think we were all concerned about. I know how it is working out the school budget. I know it's worked out with the town. Everybody's trying to be, good soldiers in that process, make sure that we're not, from a school department standpoint, you're not overstepping, working with Steve and the administration and the overall budget. And that's how we've always done it. That's how you did it this year. But, it was very clear when you said what's not in the budget. This is what we had to not do. And this is obviously what you're saying is what we would have done if we had the money. So to Dan's point, I think Dan's right. You want to know what it's going to be used for, but I think it was there, and that's what we were talking about on the night of the school budget. So, so I just wanted to make that point, and also want to reiterate Eric's point. I mean, the investment, especially in the special education department, if you can create the in-house programs, you're going to save 4, 5, 6 times what you're investing. And so in the long term, you're going to save money instead of continuing to pay that large amount every year, which means the taxpayers will save money.
Eric?
Yeah, I will just add to what has been already stated in that it's telling for me when we talk about a level service budget in a school department where we have saying we want to see something better. And we certainly can't do better without a transformational budget to support that. And so if we want to see better or see different, then we have to do different with how we support it. So when I hear level service budget, it means we're going to get the same thing that we've gotten. And I think people just need to recognize that if we don't add anything to it, an investment, and outside of this, in other business, startup funds, if you're running a business, you have to make the initial investment if you're going to get something jump-started. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work, but you can't stand still and go back every year and have level service budget. And the time that I've been here, you almost don't want to ask questions because it is the same thing plus a percentage each time. There isn't anything that maximizes the expertise of the leadership. Okay, what would you do? Wow, we'd like to do this, we'd like to do that. There isn't any of that. It's, well, here's what we have. And I just think that is not where we are. If we are going to move the needle, then we have to put a little bit more gas in the tank. So,
Thank you. Anyone else?
I'm all set. Well, I'm not.
Sir, go ahead. No, go ahead. Sure. Yeah.
You got Paul down there.
Paul.
Oh, and Paul has one more, too. We'll end with you, Paul.
Hey, everybody. I don't even think that's not on. Oh, it is? Okay, good. Josh Kepnes, I'm on the school committee also, but I did want to just address something. So first of all, I have 2 kids in the school system, neither in the special ed program. But what we did in the February meeting that we had 4 parents with kids with special needs. They came in. They talked about the deficiencies of their kids and what they're witnessing for the special needs program. And it was heart-wrenching to hear, like, in these people, anything from not having an IEP correctly followed, or one classroom was going to have K through 5 in one classroom, and it just didn't seem like a good learning environment. So I actually, when we went through the budget and we voted on it, I made a proposal to add the $550K, and that was mainly around the special needs. It was all going to be allocated to that, and I think Mary can actually speak better to it, or Pam could. But I think throwing as much money as we can at this right now, we see a gap right now, and if we're not going to throw any money at the gap, like it doesn't make much sense, right? We have people that are pleading with us to throw some money and make it better, and I think we have a real opportunity to do it. So just wanted to do that. Didn't want to muddy the waters. I just wanted to kind of throw it out there.
Thank you. Paul?
I agree with everything that's been said on our committee. But I have been here for a few years, and I've been town meeting member for a few years. And I come from a family that's been involved with education for 50 years. And what I've seen here, and I really have always not felt good about it, was that we were always sort of just level funding. And you level fund and you take a half a step forward and 1 step back. It's not that everybody's not working at it. It's not that we don't have good administrators, excellent teachers, et cetera, but you can only level fund so far. And the question has always been, well, what are we going to give the taxpayers? We're giving the taxpayers, we hope, the best possible education they can get for their dollar, and the quality of education that allows you to sell your home eventually or not at a better level than if you're living in an area that has a terrible educational system and people don't want to move in. So that's what we're giving the taxpayers. Quality education. And to spend this kind of money, we're taking that step forward. And it's the step we have to take, because we can't afford level funding anymore. So when I asked Mary about special ed, and I know the answer, just wanted her to say it, right? But that's the problem. No more level funding. That doesn't mean we have to go crazy, and we're not throwing money around. Period. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion.
Go ahead.
I move that we recommend that $1.75 million be appropriated from free cash to the school department budget for the special education supplemental appropriation. So that's to basically codify what you suggested earlier.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Mr. Chairman, Mary, thank you for being here. Article 5. Been waiting for this one.
Our Public Works Director and Operations Director slipped into the room during the conversation about the schools. But this is an article that was discussed briefly throughout this process. We talked about it a little bit during the budget process. We talked about it during the overview of the new contract regarding trash and some of the changes in service that we're going to be looking at. The recommendation made was to, well, the purchase of these bins has to be funded from free cash in order for us to purchase the bins wholesale from the state bid and the vendor that we've identified. And there was a question about reimbursement for said costs. And the reason this article was delayed till this point was that it was part and parcel of the conversation regarding schools. So What is in the warrant booklet before you is a recommendation to appropriate the free cash so that those bins can be purchased.
Thank you. Mike?
So we've, in multiple different forums, we've made this point, I think at least I've made this point perfectly clear, that under no circumstances will I support the concept that the town expend $1 million to buy citizens trash barrels that they currently buy for themselves. Again, I understand fully how the process works. I understand that obviously we need to have these barrels in place for July 1st so that the residents are able to get trash pickup. And accordingly, there is no other option under the circumstances but to pay for those carts through the $980,000 appropriation from free cash. However, I will only support that expenditure if there is a like-kind element to this in which the community will be reimbursed by those people who will be using those barrels in a like amount going forward. I just, you know, and the truth is that, again, people can say you're making policy, you're not being advisory. Go right ahead. The truth is that I can't support a policy in which we prioritize a $1 million payment to buy residents trash cans. Not when we all agree that, at least this board all agrees, that we have dramatic needs in other areas within this community that are far more important than residents being bought trash cans. I mean, I think we should give residents a break. I don't think we should make any money off of these trash cans. We're buying them at wholesale. I think that we should only be reimbursed at wholesale. I'm sure there are other communities which would be more than happy to charge retail for these particular barrels and basically increase their revenue. My instinct, of course, is to do that, but I'm going to not. Because, again, it doesn't, this is, you know, our process. We'd hate to be innovative as it relates to revenues. It would be terrible. So in this particular situation, again, I understand where we're at with it. I have no problem with the process that we went through in terms of getting the trash contract. I have no problem with the idea that we're going to be needing these larger bins in order to be able to allow for the automatic collection. None of that stuff. But again, my strong belief is that this needs to be reimbursed by the users.
Arthur?
Yeah, other than not agreeing with Mike's inclination to charge retail, I do agree with everything else that he said on this particular, and I'm not going to repeat it all.
Eric?
I already paid for my trash pickup, and so I'm not the person to ask about it.
Sensitive subject, no doubt.
Which, by the way, is another whole. I'm not going to go, but I always get a kick out of this when they say it. We have 16%, 16 or 18% of our residents who are taxpayers, who more than likely pay as much, if not more, taxes than I pay for my single-family residence. And we've made a policy decision. That's exactly what it is in this community, that we've made a policy decision, and pardon my language, to screw those 16% of the people over as it relates to trash. I don't know why they're second-class citizens as it relates to this particular issue. I mean, I understand some of the other issues, why it's important, why it's impractical for the town to provide certain services to condo developments, but there's no reason that we couldn't provide trash pickup to those residents. made a policy decision not to. And I think it's a perfectly reasonable policy decision to make people pay for bins. So,
I would just agree with Mike.
Okay. I thought you might have some deeper insight into
Well,
this.
I
particular
could,
issue,
but
so
it goes deeper past barrels.
We'll leave it at that.
Yes.
Erin?
I agree with Mike. I just want to ask again, these barrels, for the life of the contract, right? They get repaired or replaced by the company, the trash company?
We have it set up right now that the contractor in the proposed contract, they would repair, maintain them. If a barrel had to be replaced, that would be the town's or the resident's responsibility, depending on the policy.
I think it's really important to make sure people know that it can be repaired, right? A wheel could come off, that's something easily repaired. The town resident doesn't have to go out and spend $50 more. And I think that there'd be more acceptance too if people knew that they didn't have to replace it every 2 years if a wheel fell off, right? That barrel could actually last the life of the contract, and I just don't know if that's being noted in all of this. And so when it goes to the town, I would really hope that that's part of what's marketed to everybody, so that way there is more acceptance.
We'll have to work at that message, and the message about the length of them is not from the manufacturer.
Yep.
That's from us talking to other towns similar to Danvers and what lifespan they're seeing.
Okay, thank you.
Ted?
I think I agree with everything Mike said. In the last article, I didn't want to chime up, but I deeply resent being told that I'm throwing money around. Right now, right up here, we're taking money back, okay? So we don't just walk in here and casually do our job. I resent being told by certain people in town government that we make willy-nilly decisions in 2-hour meetings. That's complete garbage. We spend hours on this. A lot of the decisions being made up here or advice being given up here has been years in the making. We talked last night about charter review. From the top of the United States government all the way to this government, there are people that are appointed to positions by elected officials, and there are elected officials. And there's a very good reason for that. And I'd suggest to all of you guys that some of the tougher decisions or suggestions that have emanated from any board in this town in the last 5 years have come from us. And there's a reason for that. It's because we're appointed. So if you want to discuss that, maybe we should have a charter review in a few years. With respect to this, I completely agree. $980,000 on trash cans, we can't afford it.
Paul?
Everything that I would want to say has been said, so, but I'm in total agreement with what I've heard so far.
Can I jump in?
Sure.
What is the manufacturer warranty on this? Forget about what you got from other towns.
Mr. Chairman, I think I'd have to take a minute to look that up, if I can, but I'll look it up for you.
Well, we'll take a minute, and we'll take some questions from the audience, and we'll get right back to you. Mr. Bennett?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Awaiting the town manager to come before us with a plan to have the residents repay for the barrels on a fair and equitable manner. Hopefully, we can discuss that at our next meeting on Thursday, so that we know how to accomplish that.
Great.
'Cause I don't think there's a plan right now.
Thank you. Mr. Bates?
Bill Bates, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 4, good evening. I want to take a little different tact on this. I'm very proud of what the FinCom did on the previous article and making a statement to the school committee and to the community that we're going to increase our commitment to education in an effort to move that needle forward. And I think it's fantastic. With regards to this article, in fairness, the taxpayers can't afford much more either. I have a home in this town that is just under $8,000 a year for my taxes. I talked with a gentleman off of Dayton Street the other day. His taxes are $13,000 a year. So we've put in our share too. The taxpayers have stepped up. We need a break. We've all been through some tough times. Maybe this $980,000 is a statement to the taxpayers in this town. We appreciate you. You've kept this town going. You've paid those taxes. So let's not be as quick to say.
Let's you have a condo.
I'm sorry?
Let you have a condo, though, right? Make
And,
sure you.
and I love that you brought that up, Mr. Landers, through you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
You know better than anybody. Those rules were set for a very good reason.
Why did-
Those homes were allowed to be built, I'm sorry, I'm yelling. Those homes.
Are they taxpayers?
Let me finish, please.
Are they taxpayers?
Of course they are.
Then why aren't they getting it?
Because they're
Why are we,
buildings,
why
they
are
are
we so
in.
worried about the taxpayer except not 16% of them, Bill?
I am worried about every single taxpayer and people that have to be big boys and girls and realize when they live in a condominium that was allowed to develop to a greater density than any other single-family home, there were certain reasons given that we were going to have difficulty with trucks going down those roadways. Let's not reinvent the wheel. I don't want to play the game. It's because you live in a
You're playing a game, Bill. That's what you're doing with this. You're up here playing a game. The reality of it is don't tell me about fire services for condos. Condos certainly get fire services. If that condo's burning, they're going to go and put the fire out. The reality of it is, because we were both there when they tried to have those services provided to the condominiums. That whole thing happened. The decision was made at that. There is no real reason. This density issue that you're saying is not the case.
I disagree. It is
There
the
is
case.
no reason. They came before us. They didn't do it very well. They were really foolish in the attempt because they thought we were an open town meeting when they did it. But the reality of it is there is absolutely.
Excuse me, Mr.
we've
Landers, you're
made
reinventing history
No,
on that.
I was
That
there.
is not accurate.
We were there.
That I was there, and
Gentlemen,
what you
I think
have to
we've moved.
remember.
Can we stay on the warrant article, please?
I lived in back of Old Salem Village condominiums. I remember when they were being built. Those roads were not built to the same standard that a public way would have to be built, that a rubbish truck would go down. That was part of the negotiating of why Old Salem Village condos was allowed to develop the number of units that they are down there. Let's not go backwards. I take your point, Mr. Chairman. We'll stay with this article. Like I say, the taxpayers need a break too. And maybe, I was, going to offer an amendment on town meeting floor to go the other way. But after this FinCom set a wonderful example that you can do we can move things forward. I may perhaps set an example that maybe this is $980,000. Maybe Mr. and Mrs. Smith, you don't have to go and buy that barrel. You already bought it with your $7,000, $8,000, or $13,000 taxes per year. Just consider it, that's all.
Thank you. Nova?
Nova Salmon Town Meeting Member, Precinct 1. I'm in agreement with. I'm in agreement with the Finance Committee in general with this situation. I don't know where I would want the $980,000 to go. I don't even care if it stays with DPW. I just don't think that we should be spending it on trash barrels that we do all buy. And maybe somebody would say, well, what's the difference if we do it on trash barrels or if we fix more roads or buy a historic house or whatever we choose to do with it. I think it's just we've already paid those taxes in. We already buy our own trash barrels. Let's just buy our trash barrels and we'll use this money for something more important, something better, something greater for the town than trash barrels. And again, maybe it makes no difference to people, maybe one thing or the other. And I would also say that if there is a hardship, if there is a family that says, we cannot afford these then then fine, then that's okay. I don't know who would make that decision. I don't know what board would decide they don't have to pay, but that's okay. But I think that most people can afford to buy their trash barrels and spend our free cash on something better, splash pad or whatever. Anyway, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Nova, and I can't imagine a policy coming out of the town manager's office or the Board of Selectmen that wouldn't involve tax abatements for seniors and families that are in need. So that's certainly something that, thank you for bringing that to the attention of the committee, too. Appreciate that. Anything else from Mr. Zubrick?
I told myself I wasn't going to say anything, but I think you've heard basically my words from Mr. Bates, which is absolutely what this situation is. We have an elected select board. We have an appointed town manager who's made the decision to put this under a free cash amount that's available from our tax money that's been paid already. So what are we trying to change here? This is a change in our refuse collection system, and Mr. Lane has been very gracious in providing the information to us in the past. The contract is different than what we have right now with JRM. The contract requires that these barrels, which are extra heavy duty, be lifted and dumped into the truck with a one-man on the truck, the truck driver. This has been done all over the communities in the North Shore. So this isn't the time for making that kind of a decision, because the Board of Selectmen has already approved it, and the town manager has provided the funding for it. So what are we arguing about? The thing is, this is a change in what our refuse collection is going to be. And that refuse collection is going to cost us, what, $800,000 more a year? Plus the cost of the barrels, because they are a requirement to collect the refuse and put it into the truck. And that cost is already included in the $800,000 increase.
No, it's not.
No, it's not.
No, it's not.
That's why we're here talking about this.
The $800,000 increase from last year's refuse collection,
Strictly
that contract is going up.
correct.
Right.
And that has nothing to do with that trash barrel
They're
cost.
separate.
Yes, it does.
No, it
because
doesn't.
that
No.
refuse
It's
collection.
completely separate,
con-
my
They're
friend.
separate, two separate issues.
All right, then I don't know what the heck we're talking about.
Well, we've figured something out tonight then. That's good.
Anything else from the audience?
And I would just warn you guys that this is just the tip of the iceberg as far as what it's gonna cost us to get rid of trash in the future. You know, we're already tied, once again, taxpayers are paying, it's their trash. So it can go up in a fee or it can go up in a tax rate.
Again,
I mean,
this taxpayers need a break thing in Danvers. I guess we can all say that, right? We all pay, I think everybody here is a homeowner, right? We've all paid our taxes over the years. We've never done a Prop 2.5 override, so we don't pay more than, what, the 98% of other communities in the state who have done one. We have routinely in the past, although the last few years we've certainly been at the levy, but in past years we have not been at the levy. We've left amounts so quote unquote behind. If you look at, we have an excellent tax mix in regards to commercial and residential. We have the ultimate amount as it relates to classification to give the residential tax payer the best result as you can with that. I don't know, what else can we do? I don't think anybody has ever sat here and looked. You have certainly, my good friend Mr. Bates, I've been here with him for 30 years. I don't ever really remember him getting up there and saying that we're overspending. During the time that he spent as a school committee member, I don't ever remember him coming in and saying, hey, by the way, we're spending a little bit too much on the schools this year, let's get it through. No. If anything in this community, as we've talked about, we've probably, if we've made mistakes, it's because we've been foolish in regards to how we've done our school building and how we've done our financing, which is, as Eric made very clear, has resulted in tens of millions of dollars spent on it. But that's not because, that's frankly because we weren't willing to make hard decisions when it came to things like debt overrides. And we weren't willing to make hard decisions when it came to the construction of those buildings. It's always been amazing to me that the people who have the greatest badge of honor about the fact that we're one of whatever small number of communities there are that haven't done a Prop 2.5 override are basically the people that have cost the taxpayer tens of millions of dollars extra than we would have had to pay if we'd done it differently. And so in this particular situation, I think that this board and most of these activities have been excellent in regards to giving the taxpayer a break. Again, this rubbish situation, we've got a whole bunch of taxpayers, commercial taxpayers, condo taxpayers, none of who get this particular service. So, you know, again, this is, to me, is just, it's makes perfect sense. It shouldn't be a priority. $1 million shouldn't be a priority for rubbish bins. You know what? Make your on the town meeting floor. Go ahead. Doesn't, you know, all we do is try to do the best we can as it relates to it.
Mr. Bates, do you have something new to add that's relevant to the warrant article?
I do.
Go ahead.
The $980,000 we are talking about is additional taxation. It is the cost of providing a service. All we're talking about is how that money is paid. There's no question about what it is. So, and Mike wants to go back and talk about past elections. Elections have consequences. We've dealt with that. I supported overrides. We lost. Get over it. We have to deal with what we're dealing with today. This $980,000 that the town, the selectmen, and the town manager are recommending be included in your taxation is just that. And so, like I say, I'm so excited about what you've done for the previous article. Mike mentioned my years on the school committee. No, I never came up and said, oh, don't give us any more money. But I sat and I negotiated with teachers and looked them in the eye and said, no, you're not going to get a raise this year. The taxpayers can't afford it.
But Bill, that's what we're the finance committee. We're supposed to be Dr. No sometimes. There's been recommendations that have been made. We're giving our advice to the town meeting, and they can choose accordingly. Right now, we're saying, no, we really shouldn't spend $1 million on trash cans. That's our opinion. That's our opinion, from our informed opinion from participating in budget conferences, listening to every single budget presentation, understanding the future cost increases that are coming down the road via anything you want to name. This trash contract increases with CPI every year. Guess what CPI is right now? It's not 2.5% to all the guys that want to backslap themselves for never passing a budget override. Guess what? Has everybody been watching what teachers' contracts have been getting renewed for lately? It's not 2.5%. We know that. We're looking ahead. We're looking around the corner. We're giving it advice to everybody. If the town meeting wants to throw the Danvers trash party and reject our advice, that's fine. But we're on record giving the advice we give. And we should all be at peace with that. I will also say that this is about $120 for a household that needs 2 cans, and the town hasn't even decided how to assess that. I'm not saying that's a small, an inconsequential amount of money, but I am saying I see plenty of other incongruities in how people are assessed fees in this town. Danvers High School athletes have to pay $240 to play one sport. Essex Tech athletes have to pay $100. Do you think there are some families in Danvers High School that would like to play another sport or are really shaking the couch cushions to come up for $240? Nobody's dying on that hill. So we're making a recommendation. I'm making a recommendation. And that's the way it is. You're welcome to oppose it, but I don't think, given the state of the town, giving the taxpayers a break to buy trash cans that they will not have to replace for a relatively long amount of time.
15 years, I believe.
15 years.
15 years.
I buy at least one trash can every year at Home Depot. I have a large family, but it's $45, $50 every single time I do it. I know that it's not fun when you have to write the first check, but I would argue this is net present value positive to everybody that buys trash cans.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, just as Mr. Blake says that his opinion is well educated and informed, mine also is that we pay a lot of money in taxes. And if we get this $980,000, we will either pay it in taxes or we will pay it in a fee. So I'm just saying, just consider the fact that where it is an change in the policy of the town, that maybe it is a chance to give the taxpayers a break. Just as you said, the parents that sit there and have to make a decision of how many sports their kids play, there are seniors and people like myself in this town that have to make a payment every quarter on those taxes. And they ought to be given the same consideration that you want the families that are given for their student to play a sport. It's fair. What's fair for that side is fair for this side.
Right. And they're paying $240 a season.
I can't hear.
They're paying $240 a season to play sports. What did you pay to play sports in high school? I paid this much.
I didn't play sports in high school. I went to work. I worked during high school.
Fair enough. I had a paper.
Everybody's got their own little stories. On the 980,000, Mr. Chairman, I'm just saying that it's going to be paid for by the taxpayers one way or the other. I don't think I'll be supporting any measure that recalls it. I think the program as presented by the town administration is fair, and we should go with Article 5 as written. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bates.
Can we move the question?
Anything else from the committee? Is there a motion?
May I make a motion?
Go ahead, Wally. Is this your first motion?
It is my first.
Okay.
So thank you all for bearing with me. I move that the Finance Committee recommend that the town vote to appropriate $980,000 from free cash for the purchase of refuse and recycling carts. We further recommend that the town manager explore options to recover the cost of said carts from households.
Nicely done. There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Congratulations. Your father would be very proud. For those of you who don't know, Wally's father was a longtime member of this committee.
Can I get a copy of that?
He wasn't just the member of the committee, he was the chair.
Watch out, sir. You had the gavel?
He had a gavel.
If he was here, we'd be watching Celtics.
You're absolutely right.
On that TV.
Yeah, yeah.
Thanks, Sarah.
All right.
I think the last item.
We still have to finish these guys up.
Yeah, can you,
Well, that's the
tell
last.
me?
You're right.
I was going to say the last
Dave's
item.
like, hey, I need $20 million.
Can you ask able to warranty us on the bars?
No, he doesn't.
Oh, yeah, you haven't told us what the warranty is on the barrels yet.
Thank you for your patience. We did check, and on our proposal, it's a 10-year manufacturer's warranty.
Thank you.
Thank you.
10 is good enough.
Mr. Bates, thank you for giving him the time in order to look that up.
When we talked to other towns, they were ending their second 5-year contract and going into the third 5-year contract with the same bins and expected them to last that third contract. Most of them planned on them lasting 10 years.
Okay.
Just proving our value in the purchase, that's all. For the homeowner.
Right.
Where we at?
So DPW tax supported?
So the presentation was made on the DPW tax supported budget. A vote on that budget was deferred until the discussion that was had tonight. So if there are, if there are further questions for Mr. Lane or Mr. Dever regarding the tax supported budget, we'd be happy to take those.
Move the budget.
I have a question.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, sorry, I have a question.
Go ahead.
It's not a challenge, it's just more a question about the contract negotiation. So I negotiate contracts, that's my job. And I also work for a robotic company. And so I'd like to understand, I know that these trash companies are not interested in the residential service, right? They're not as interested in that as commercial. How did they pose it to you that the automated trash pickup would be more expensive than having 4 men on a truck? I'm just trying to understand that.
Oh, no, no one proposed
Less
it.
expensive? Okay,
It was
okay.
proposed it was less expensive.
Okay.
And it's proposed this is the industry standard due to their insurance
Fair enough,
requirements.
thank you. Okay.
Actually, I have 2 quick questions. What's the total dollar amount of the contract in the first year, roughly? I'm not gonna let you down, Steve. Oh, they want CPI though. 1.17? Is it 1178? My colleague to the left here.
And then it's another 565 for,
That's for, so what I'm trying to understand is, if CPI next year is 8%, what's the dollar amount that's gonna increase our budget by, and basically how much more than 2.5% is that?
So David is I believe that the 2 line items combined for trash and recycling collection are 1.687, but it wouldn't be as simple as applying 8% on that gross number because there are offsetting revenues that are baked into that.
Okay.
But roughly speaking, it's about a $1.7 million combined contract.
Okay.
And if I'm wrong, David will correct me.
Okay, that's fine. Just,
Yes, thank you. That's why he's the town manager. 1.76.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nicely done.
687 was my guess.
so for,
It
so
is
essentially for,
actually, yeah, 1,763,692.
so if we're assuming like 2-3% growth in our revenues every year, like a 6% number is gonna be like a 4% over, basically exceed our revenue growth by 4%, and that's gonna be like about $17,000 for every 100 basis points. So like 60 grand. Okay. Just to point out, that's another, like, the town has a lot of liabilities that we're on the hook when they grow faster than 2.5%. And this, I know, I fully trust that you negotiated the best contract. This is another liability that we're adding to that pile that can grow faster than CPI, then, grow faster than the 2 or 3% annual revenue growth that we have budgeted and can create further pain down the road. The second question I have near and dear to my heart is cardboard. In the immediate, after the immediate launch of the contract, are there any plans to increase the amount of cardboard capacity at the transfer center? Because right now it's like 1 bin, or like one big dumpster.
Yeah, so staff is exploring the size of that bin and whether or not the transfer station is the right location for
Okay.
that bin, if that's convenient enough. Part of the contract is collecting cardboard at all the schools, so we have that type of truck picking up cardboard. So we realized going into this, we need to look at a cardboard collection that's convenient to the citizens.
Okay, that's it for me, thanks.
Anything else from the members of the committee? Mark, we had time for citizen comment last week. This is just finishing up the hearing. Go ahead.
Just for clarification,
Was it a question or a clarification?
it can
Go
be
ahead, Mark.
either.
Go ahead.
You're having too much fun. The question I have is, last year's cost of trash removal was, I think, just over $1 million? Is that what we're saying? And this year's cost of trash removal, including the same services that we had in the past, is going to be 1.763. Is that a right number?
Close.
Close. Then this number that we have, this proposal, is that based on having these new trash barrels or not? If we don't need the trash barrels, then we go back to the JRM system.
That's not an option.
Well, that's...
If there was a question, as I understand the question, we had the choice in negotiating these contracts whether to have the haulers buy the barrels and amortize the cost in our contract, or buy them wholesale ourselves. And it made a lot more sense economically to buy the barrels and not have the hauler take that and put profit and overhead on top of that, et cetera.
So our new contract cost for trash removal, including the new barrels, is over $2.7 million this year.
The cost differential this year
This
in the
year.
budget is $853,000 over last year, but that is also inclusive of the transfer station adjustment. So you would add 980 to that, so the cost of contract is up, call it 850, and we have a one-time expense for these barrels, which will never all have to be replaced at the same time again.
right.
They'll have to be replaced piecemeal as they disappear or break, et cetera.
So this is an amortized period of time for the barrels, and
Well, we're eating the cost up front for the barrels, so they're not being
I
amortized
agree.
in the contract.
I agree. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's the only thing.
Is there a motion?
Move,
The budget?
yeah, move the article.
Is there a
Second.
second? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Article 40. Switch books.
I have totally lost.
I don't remember whether we need action on this, but it does need to exist in the warrant in case amendments, friendly or unfriendly or hostile or docile, are made on the floor and approved. We cannot leave town meeting without a balanced budget, so this exists so that adjustments made throughout the evening, we would have time to, even if it was to extend town meeting for a night, to come back and make sure that we have a budget that the Department of Revenue will accept. So.
Any questions? Anything from the audience?
No, you need a vote for this.
I know. Thank you. Is there a motion?
Move the article.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Ooh,
And thank you.
where's the confetti?
Thank you.
Just a comment of thanks to to Nova, who we look forward to seeing again next year. But this was an interesting year for FinCom, and certainly proud to have been a part of the group, and especially our new members. We're grateful to have you. And a reminder that I will see all of you at probably 6:30 on May 15th for a scheduled FinCom meeting that we typically have scheduled just prior to the 7:30 annual town meeting, in case there are any last-minute changes to anything on the warrant. So I look forward to seeing you all then at Danvers High School on the 15th. Thank you.
Somebody call Bill, tell him not to come? No?
All right. See you later.
Meeting adjourned.
Might be upstairs.